Although the market has changed drastically, we still found relevance in what we offer, and I attribute a lot of that to our service and our people here that are here to answer the phone and that stand behind what we do. So that's Phoenix Systems and me in a nutshell. And if you guys are ever interested in learning about anything else that we do have a See for Yourself event coming up on September 9th, if I'm not mistaken. If you guys go on to our website or on control4.com, you can register for that event. There'll be drinks, food, hors d'oeuvres, and we can give you guys a demo of the rooms, and you'll see some of the other products that we offer. All right. Any questions for me? Nope. It's Control4. Yes, sir. Yep. Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, I think a round of applause is in order. Thank you. And this is Tech Execs. So as we all know at Tech Execs, there's this thing called user errors, which I am guilty of for not pressing the green button. So I apologize. That would be totally on me to start this meeting with. But again, my name is Carter Patterson. I'm with the Forsyth County Chamber Board of Directors, and Tech Execs is something I've been a part of since it formed, and it's always a fun group. We're here today to talk about smart cities, but before we get going, I want to recognize our today's sponsors, which is Ad Victoriam Solutions, Eclipse Networks, Smith & Howard Certified Public Accountants, and our economic development partner is Forsyth County Government. So thank you for our sponsors for making today's events possible. And now we'll get started with our distinguished panel to talk about smart cities. And I'm going to do a brief introduction for each of our panel here. Dave Rhodes is the Assistant City Attorney for the City of Peachtree Corners and is the legal counsel for Curiosity Lab, the city's proving ground for technology that has graduated from a closed laboratory environment. Curiosity Lab is located within an existing 500-acre technology park and consists of a 5G-enabled 1.5-mile autonomous and connected vehicle test track smart city laboratory. They played an integral role in Curiosity Lab's recent efforts to develop and implement a National Institute of Standards and Technology compliant transportation, data management, and security plan. He is also a judge advocate in the Tennessee Army National Guard, thank you, sir, and serves as the brigade judge advocate for the 230th Sustainment Brigade, headquartered in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Prior to attending law school, Dave served on active duty as an infantry captain in the 1st Armored Division and deployed twice to Baghdad. His military service awards include the Combat Infantryman Badge and Bronze Star Medal. Dave lives in Decatur, Georgia with his wife Sharon and daughter Reagan. Our next panelist is Cynthia Curry, Director of Smart Cities with the Metro Atlanta Chamber. Cynthia Curry is passionate about supporting, building, and promoting the region's IoT ecosystem. Her mission is to drive collaboration and engagement within the IoT and mobile community to strengthen Metro Atlanta's position as a technological powerhouse. She has helped MAC launch IoT Atlanta, a consortium of business, government, and nonprofit leaders united to help Metro Atlanta to become a globally recognized leader in IoT innovation. She leads the MAC IoT Mobile Leadership Council, who implements the guiding principles of IoT ATL and will help Atlanta on the map for their IoT and smart cities innovation. Cynthia has helped nurture Atlanta technology companies for over 20 years. Before coming to MAC, she partnered with companies across the city to advise them on their talent acquisition strategy and help them acquire the top talent necessary to fuel their success. Her passion for strengthening the Atlanta technology community has shaped her career. Through her commitment to growing the Atlanta technology market, she has helped hundreds of companies in Atlanta grow and prosper. Cynthia lives in Decatur and has been in Atlanta for over 30 years. She is committed to giving back to the community and serves on the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition Board, as well as Technology Association of Georgia, TAG Mobility Board. She is a mom, wife, cyclist, runner, hiker, music lover, and a foodie. Her passion for Atlanta technology and IoT fuel her goal of helping MAC and Atlanta do great things. Our last but not least, Eric Hornsby. After a 20+ year executive in the technology and digital signage world, Eric, along with his partner, saw the two worlds converging and recently started SmartPoint.io. Leveraging a vast IP portfolio and many decades of success in both the military and commercial space, Eric's SmartPoint.io keeps visual engagement, connectivity, and edge compute technology clean, cooled, and connected in environments otherwise not conducive to their operation. SmartPoint.io is a data center on the sidewalk, a digital infrastructure platform that enables next-gen computing on the network edge and serves as a commercial bridge to civic benefit. So thank you, panelists, for being here today. And I'll try not to have any more user errors today. But we'll start off with questions. And if you have any online, I suppose you can put it on the chat feature and Scott will let me know what those questions are. But we're just going to start with the most obvious question today. How do you define a smart city? And who'd like to take that one? Cynthia?
Sure, I'll start with that. I turned my mic on.
Press the button.
All right. So I would say a smart city is really a city that leverages technology to solve their citizens' most pressing problems in inclusive and equitable ways. So the history of the smart city has been slow a little bit in the US. I think we're about to have a big explosion in that area right now with all the money that's coming in. Technology has not really been embraced to move a city forward as much as we've seen over in Europe and other places like that. They've always had a lot of money coming down from the top over there to help make sure that smart city solutions were nurtured and embraced and developed, and that innovation was being furthered by the community. So I'm very excited that I think we're about to enter that kind of a space. And so smart city really is all about data. And I love that we're here in this place that leverages IoT. So when you get a lot of data about a lot of things, you can solve a lot of problems and prevent a lot of problems. So there's several different levels to a smart city. There's kind of knowing what's happening, there's knowing what's going to happen, and then there's even predicting how to stop it from happening. So I see that as three different kind of evolutions of a smart city. I would say we're probably in the first one. Atlanta launched their first smart city effort in 2017 over by Ponce City Market with the launch of the smart corridor. And a lot of that technology is still in place. And we are really on the cusp of embracing a whole new generation of smart cities in Atlanta. So I think it's really exciting. But to me, at the end of the day, it's really using technology to do good for the citizens and making sure that you're leveraging data to make really informed decisions and automate and efficiency as good as possible and help with safety and transparency of government and the citizen. So that's how I think of a smart city.
Well, that's a great answer. And I'm going to dumb it down a bit. I'm going to put it on more on my level.
Great.
Okay, as an average person driving in a city,
Yeah.
Tell me what a smart city does to help
so
them.
We'll just take an example of the smart corridor, right?
Great.
So since this has been going on, the project is closed, we've learned our lessons from that. So first of all, I'd like to say we think of a smart city as, again, inclusive. It's not all traffic lights and technology. So, but this is a technology example. So we have in the lights along North Avenue, the smart corridors along the North Avenue corridor right in front of Ponce City Market. So a lot of those lights are equipped with signals that are reacting to traffic as it happens instead of on an actual timer, so to speak. So we've already seen the data that during time after big events on that road, traffic has been reduced up to 25% after those big events. And on a day-to-day basis, it's almost 15% of traffic reduction in those areas. So as the traffic lights are responding to the real-time traffic, they also automatically turn green whenever a emergency vehicle is coming along. That is just one example of the every single day advantage that a citizen can really love, especially in Atlanta. We have a lot of traffic.
Fantastic, and that's a great example. And Scott Evans has his hand up, so hopefully we're not having any more technical problems. Awesome. Okay. Thank you. So I can certainly, as we all can, sitting at a stoplight, maybe it's 11 p.m. at night and there's nobody around
Right.
and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting. And what the implications are for that with you're just sitting there burning gasoline, waiting for
Perfect example.
a stoplight. And that's probably how this started. It was probably a more simple example, but with that, is the stoplights just visually looking for people?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that they do it. There's sensors and then there's cameras. There are also camera license plate readers that are kind of looking out for traffic, and they're trying to lower pedestrian accidents, right? Because around that area, there's a lot of traffic going across the road. So that's one thing, but it's done through sensors and cameras, mostly the traffic lights.
Great. So one heads up for our audience today is that the panelists and I did have a quick meeting yesterday to help just to introduce ourselves and to have some back and forth for today's meeting. So the next question we really wanted to bring up was, well, what's different about, what do we see today in smart cities versus what are we going to see tomorrow in smart cities, or even today starting to blossom? And Eric, would you like to answer that, or would you? We can.
Happy to.
Okay, great.
So hello. In terms of today versus tomorrow, I love the car example. So it's one of the most powerful and mission critical pieces of technology us as people are really ever going to use. So if you look at vehicular technology from very recent yesterday and today, everybody has, or most people have somewhat of a connected car, in terms of that car has onboard technology that's allowing that car to make, or to enable you to make better decisions as a driver, whether it's an indication of drifting out of your lane, it alerts you of something in your in front of you that perhaps based upon the velocity of your vehicle, there may be a higher probability of striking that object. And the car makes you aware, and in some cases, the car even reacts for you. Really amazing what's available today. And when you draw that parallel to a connected city of tomorrow, and much of which Cynthia just described to us, you have other technology outside of the vehicle able to also communicate things that onboard technology of the car was not able to communicate effectively to you in that moment. So whether it's a traffic light aware that there's an emergency vehicle approaching, and not only the traffic light can react, but now that can be communicated back to your car, and your car can help you react to something that wasn't within your purview at that point in time. And other things that the Internet of Things, whether it's a camera as a sensor, or it's a traffic light, it's an emergency vehicle as a vehicle communicating infrastructure. That's one of the biggest things we're going to see in the connected city or connected venue of tomorrow as it relates to an operational technology peripheral like a car. So that's a lot of what I see forward thinking.
Okay.
And just to jump in on that, I think one thing, just speaking from the local government side, is that technology, the ability to get that information quickly, also frees local government up to do other things. It wasn't that long ago where to do a traffic count, you typically grabbed an intern with a clipboard to sit at an intersection. It sounds like eons ago, but it wasn't. And so the ability for the local government to get that data and be able to kind of leverage it and make well-informed decisions when they're dealing with their infrastructure really, just delivers more tax money back to the residents, because the city's not tied up, or the county is not tied up answering those questions. And so another common example is just there's frequent requests for traffic calming mitigation to go out into a neighborhood. That's kind of a low-tech thing that a city or county can deal with, but the technologies that they're referencing have direct application in that scenario. Anecdotal reports from residents are a step, but they need to be validated. So all these technologies allow the cities and counties to really respond quickly and provide results.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add that cities, the world is urbanizing, right? And we consider, Metro Atlanta, and by 2050, almost 80% of the population is going to live in an urban area. So cities have to learn how to do a lot more with really the same kind of resources. So it's super challenging. So some of the other areas that I really see, I mean, Eric nailed it. We're going to all be connected. We're going to be living in a connected community. I think that is really at the end of the day what's happening. But that's going to happen through traffic. It's going to happen through smart buildings, which are incredible. Buildings that are making themselves sustainable by turning off lights and monitoring heat and air without anyone there at all, seeing, watching the patterns of what's happening within them and using energy efficiency to make sure that they're more sustainable and resilient. We're going to see a lot of this emerging in manufacturing areas. There's all kinds of new materials that are coming available. Pipes are being made out of censored alloy metal that will say, hey, there's a problem. I'm out of the deviation of normal. There's something wrong. I'm leaking or whatever. So I think the world will be more connected and will be more talking to you. And definitely the car example that Eric used, we're all driving around in little data centers now. And we'll talk about this later, but the autonomous vehicles are definitely going to be a big thing as well. And Peachtree Corners and Curiosity Lab's helping with that. But the world is growing. And so we have to figure out how to really manage everything with the resources that we have and really help preserve those for future generations and make sure that we're sustainable and resilient. And I think the technology of the smart cities is a huge thing that lets that move forward.
Fantastic. So, again, I'm going to dumb it down a little bit, but what about privacy? I mean, if I go and apply for insurance, what does an insurance company, what do they know today versus what they're going to know tomorrow about my driving habits? Does anybody want to take that?
I'll jump in. If you think about insurance today, and I like this theme of today versus tomorrow. Okay, so if you think about insurance today, you have a driving record, you have a vehicle. So there's some data points that an insurance company can gather about you, your vehicle, where you live, that are known data points. And those go into a formula that gives you your insurance premiums, rates, what have you. So if you're like me and you drive perfect and to the speed limit, you're going to be good. If you're more like my business partner, Steve, and you drive fast, you're always in a hurry, well, you know how that ends up. But as far as insurance goes for looking forward, and I'll touch on privacy, the insurance companies would likely love to be able to take other things into account. Like where do you drive? What city are you driving in? How connected and safe is that city? How is your car that you bought, which has lots of safety features and is going to have a positive impact on what your insurance premiums are? How does that also dovetail with the venues and the streets that you drive upon? And as a driver and as a resident somewhere, did you make decisions that align more strongly with a lower insurance premium, which has a direct correlation with being safer? So as far as privacy goes, I think there's a reality that we, I'll just speak for the United States, that we in this country should come to, that there's privacy of your personal identifiable information, and you should be careful with that. But there's also knowing where your car is, where you're going. There's data points that are not intrusive, but are going to be very helpful to you. And as they're very helpful to you, they're going to be very helpful to society and have an intrinsic benefit along that whole, economy, if you will. So I think there's data points that you're going to see a positive correlation with as an individual, but you also should know that these are all very anonymous data points. So they're not personally identifiable to you. They're very anonymized. So when they're used in the IoT, particularly when they're used forward thinking in terms of a blockchain, and they can really be anonymized and they can be private. You can see a lot of security in the security of your privacy.
Yes, I just wonder if I'm ever going to come home and have a speeding ticket in my mailbox, which happens today with traffic cameras, I guess. But okay.
So I think also it's one of the things that we've learned at Peachtree Corners is on the front end, you have to do a good job of educating the residents on the terms that were just thrown out. So for example, you could have a traffic camera out that is only doing object detection. So it's telling you buses, vehicles, pedestrians, And the information that the local government receiving is a count of those. And, and I won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but because of the Georgia Open Records Act, transparency is the name of the game for local governments. So we should not be in the business of accumulating raw data that we by law have to turn over. And then we were only using that information for a traffic count, but someone else can take it very easily, do facial recognition or whatever, just whatever the various things. So that's something that we on the front end have to be ready to speak quickly, to calm our residents down and say, hey, look, this is the project, this is what's going on. And it could be that it's a camera doing object detection, but that camera feed is not getting stored. It is not being accessed. It is truly just doing kind of, at the edge, getting the data points that are needed, and that data, is going away. It's being destroyed. So that's a challenge. And I know that, I've got a very boring job. My job is to pay for relationships for the city, help with compliance and risk and all those things with Curiosity Lab, and then handle random assignments that show up to conferences. But Brandon Branham, our chief technology officer, and Brian Johnson are off doing their thing, which I'm happy to do. But so we try to, I do my best to spell that out in the contract. It's something that we deal with. It's like, if the company's coming in, they're saying, no, we're not going to do it. And in plain English, the contract needs to say that. And you can see more so on the West Coast, where you've got communities that really push back against some smart city initiatives because of these privacy concerns. They'll get their hands on the contract because it's not specifically spelled out or just said in a way that's not apparent. They just assume the worst and say, well, it doesn't say you're not doing this, so we think you are. So it's just something that we'll constantly have to do.
Very good. Very good. So
You got a question?
yeah, we got a question in the back. One quick question before you ask the question: can the people at home hear him, or should he come up, or would you just like me to repeat the question?
Question, but they're also saying it's still kind of difficult to hear,
Okay, go ahead and ask your question. I'll rephrase it. So don't make it too difficult on me.
Considering that the manufacturers pretty much just want to get out as much hardware as possible, and they're not cybersecurity software people, how do you protect hardware from cyber attacks?
Okay, so the question is about the hardware that manufacturers have in the automobiles or whatever the technology is. How is the hardware protected from cyber attacks?
Yeah, considering they're not software cybersecurity people embedded in the hardware, especially the high.
Okay, and maybe if
Well,
you just
I
rephrase
will
the,
not be able to speak on a technical level, but I can say what I do as an attorney is I'm going to look through their agreement, whether it's usually it's just a service as a software or hardware. So whatever the product is or the service that they're going to be providing, and you vet what standards that they're going to put in the document. A lot of times, to your point, it's not covered. And so we have security questionnaires. We have security and privacy experts that I routinely lean on. And a lot of times it's just validating what their current security posture is. And sometimes they have to come up to a certain level before the city will allow them. And just to quickly speak on that, so Curiosity Lab is a city-funded nonprofit. They're really running the show, so to speak, but it's city infrastructure, city-owned infrastructure. So there's still the city permitting component. We're regulating the streets and the right of way and all of that. So before they would be allowed on as part of that permitting process, there's going to be a fairly strict sort of analysis of what their security posture is. And we have to do that. We went through this 171 compliance exercise. And so we have to take a very close look at what they're doing. Sometimes they have to take additional steps to answer certain questions. But that's something that if we don't do, there can always be a contract breach. I mean, someone can always promise and say, yes, here's what we're going to do, and it doesn't happen. In which case we have a contractual remedy. I mean, the residents may not be happy if that's the case, but at least we can show that we've done the due diligence. But that's really what we have to do when they come in, is ask the questions. And a lot of times you wind up, they've got to bring in other people to talk to, because you're dealing with folks who are in the business of sales. So we wind up on the phone with numerous folks within the company, kind of drilling down what their security posture is.
yeah, that's a great question. I mean, through my head, I probably read too much science fiction, but you think, when you automate too much, you leave yourself vulnerable in many ways. if there is a potential hack to make you think the light's green when it's not, or that there's no cars coming or too many cars coming, to mess things up. Is there any nefarious type of security hacks that,
And I'll say this, I mean, my honest assumption is that people get hacked at will, right? So the financial sector, they spend the most, they get hacked the most. And it's a very depressing statistic to see if you're a smaller local government. You think, well, if those folks that have an in-house team that is just at the forefront of adopting the most robust, security protocols in the world, and they're getting hacked at will, how do we compete? Well, the answer is you control very carefully the data that you're storing, and make sure that to the extent possible, you've removed any PII and just all those things, local encryption, and just those are the kind of things you have to do. You control what's in that box and just make the assumption that yes, it's possible that there could be a breach.
Are y'all working with the Augusta cybersecurity at all?
So it was really interesting. So I'm in the National Guard, and I think, and I won't. This will be a whole other subject, but we're kind of slow to realize that the cybersecurity threat is a domestic security threat, right? I mean, you've got a lot of state-sponsored activity and so there is an involvement of the Georgia National Guard. They've got a really amazing cybersecurity center in Augusta, and I was headed back from a month-long training exercise down at Fort Hood, and I was just thinking, man, we've got to reach out to those guys that walked in, and Brian Johnson, city manager, called me and he was like, hey, Augusta's sending a team up, so you got to be there Tuesday. So, and that's great. I mean, because one of the things that local governments really need help with is the response, and I think there's definitely a role to play for the National Guard and other folks, because it's a national security issue.
Okay, so besides that, we're all technology geeks here. We're also all part of the Chamber of Commerce, and I believe that as the technologies come online when they save people money, when there's government wants smart cities because they feel like they're going to save money in the long term. Can you speak to some of that, David?
Yeah,
or Cynthia?
No, I have a couple quick stats. I mean, I think it's more than just saving money. I mean, the economic development impact of IoT and smart cities is huge, and all the things within them. So got my little numbers. So smart city economic development impact by 2026 will be 20 trillion with a T dollars. So, I mean, that's not a small amount of money. So any company, any person, any organization that takes part in those technologies and that kind of ecosystem is going to take advantage of that economic development. The smart home market by itself is going to reach over $141 billion. I mean, that's huge. It's great news for Phoenix systems, right? Woo, y'all are in the right place. It's a huge market, and it's only going to continue to grow. The total economic impact of IoT is going to be over $11 trillion by 2026. So, I mean, these are all, it's not just a matter of, if you want to do it. I mean, the world is moving towards this, and it will happen. So the sooner you kind of adjust your mindset to identify the ways that maybe you could take part in this technology and bring your company along to join the party, is going to be an impact. Yeah. The smart city economic impact by 2026. It means that if you take into account all the different technologies, companies, people's jobs, that will contribute that amount of money to the economy that wasn't there before, right? So without the smart cities ecosystem thriving and all these sensors and all the things like that, that money wouldn't exist, or it would exist somewhere else, right? So as these technologies advance and as the world, it's all about adoption, really. I mean, you have to get the world to adopt the technologies that you're floating. And as that happens, more and more companies will be built, more jobs will be created, more kind of industries will branch off, and it will just create an entire economic ecosystem of itself, which it already is, but it's just going to continue to grow. I'll let you. It's a lot of talking. Sorry.
Yeah, Eric, can you embellish on the commerce side of smart city
Always
technologies?
happy to contribute with some embellishment. So if you look at efficiency as an impact, any anytime you're able to implement artificial intelligence and connected devices, you're going to create a much more efficient and scalable ecosystem. That's going to have a significant impact. And when you do that, you're going to free people up. You're going to free machines up, roadways up. You're going to free a lot of things up to do other things, likely forward-thinking things that are much more value added. So you're going to have an economic uplift in the availability of things for people to do and learn to do. But when you look at that and then you take some things very forward-thinking, but here today, if you look at blockchain and the impact that has, and I don't mean cryptocurrency and investing in it, I mean the immutable ledger that's distributed, that's going to track what's happening. It's going to reduce the cost of networking devices together and people together and businesses together. And it's going to increase efficiency about verifying that data. So when you hear terms like smart contracts, which is very closely associated or directly associated with blockchain, IoT, AI, it's going to exponentially increase the rate of intelligent and verified transactions, commerce that can take place, both commercial and commerce that relates back to civic benefit and freeing people up. You talk to lots of world leaders particularly out in the European region. One of the greatest outcomes they're looking to bring to their cities is to give people time back in their day. You know, I've heard several times, our goal as a smart city is to give you an hour back in your day. What would an hour back of your day, if it was economically positive impact, you know, if you really aggregate that across the planet? So we could go on, but the economic impact is enormous, and it's a very much an ecosystem play there.
Well said.
Well, very good. So Cynthia, when we started off, you were talking about maybe cities in Europe. Is America behind?
Yes, that's a blunt answer.
Maybe with the exception of Peachtree, maybe with the exception of Peachtree Corners, we're behind.
I mean, Peachtree Corners has brought us way far ahead. It's the gem of Georgia, one of. So I would say that we're behind, but getting there. And again, we're about to make huge efforts. There just hasn't been enough financing put towards it. And one of the troubles is that in the United States, we have 50 different states and how many hundreds of thousands of municipalities and cities within them. So we're just set up different, and it's harder to really mandate things. So the beauty of the US is that it's, you know, to each his own, and it's really individual freedoms. And so that's why I think that seeing a lot of money put in towards infrastructure and things like that will encourage individuals to really lean into this type of technology, and really will give the funds to do a lot of work around smart buildings and smart homes and IoT work that wasn't really there or possible before. So I'd say we are a little bit behind, but definitely you know, moving forward and not out of the game at all. We're just not quite as advanced as they are, but give us 5 years, we might be there.
Okay, sounds good. And David, I think I just, you know, teed it up for you to talk about Peachtree Corners and what Peachtree Corners is doing differently than, say, other cities in Georgia.
Well, I think, so the Curiosity Lab got its start, it was late 2017, early 2018, and in its infancy, it was no different than a lot of city-funded incubators. I think one of the things that got us headed in the right direction early was we had a longstanding relationship with Georgia Tech. John Avery heads up ATDC. They're I think the oldest incubator in the nation. They've been around since 1979. So we got valuable input from them. And also we had a relationship with, at the time, Sprint, now T-Mobile. They were very interested in coming in and deploying 5G, but the guidance that we got early was that, you know, you don't have to figure this out. Council had this really big concern about, we're going to build something and no one's going to come. And it was a little bit calming to hear that, you know, what you have is infrastructure, and your ability to, you know, provide it you know, it's my job to make sure we're providing the infrastructure in a responsible way. But, you know, what you're making available to sort of this consortium of universities and industry is this infrastructure to basically serve as a test bed. So your job is not to figure out what tomorrow looks like. Your job is to allow folks to come in and figure that out. And we get a lot of derivative benefit. We're also fortunate when we talk about funding. So that's always a problem. For Gwinnett County, they've had a SPLOST program. Peachtree Corners, we have 100% of our SPLOST funding is allocated towards transportation. And it took a little bit of salesmanship on my part dealing with our auditors and things like that to make the case that, improving your road system today necessarily involves looking at IoT technologies. And that quickly moves into cybersecurity and all these other runoffs, but that is still appropriate, use for money that's earmarked for transportation. And so that's how it was initially funded. We've had, ARPA came along. We now just had the infrastructure bill that I think was on Tuesday that was locked in because of the passage of the budget. And so you're starting to see the right terms built into the statutory language so that folks like myself don't have to make the sales pitch for why these two different areas. They're calling out smart city technology. So there's a $500 million grant program that we're absolutely going to be looking to leverage going forward. So that's kind of how we got the path set and the funding answered. And then really we've just been fortunate to be at the table and listening to research teams from the great universities in the area and industries and have them collaborate and then look to fill in the piece, which is, we may need to do some improvements, be it, new road striping and things like that. NHTSA has to come in and improve the route. So those are just the kind of things that we've aggressively worked on. We've got some exciting projects and we're looking to expand the track if you're familiar with Peachtree Corner. So the track is a public street. It's technology park. And so it's 3 miles in total. It's 1.5 mile route, but the autonomous vehicle shuttles can loop around. So we're working with GDOT right now to expand that and get it across 141. To our knowledge, that'll be the first time that
That's cool.
the autonomous vehicles have been on a state route. And then they've also got, there's the town center and Forum shopping centers. And so just to quickly go off on the side, I mean, what we found, we thought that we were going to come in, there's going to be this amazing testing with autonomous vehicles. What we found is there's 4 or 5 companies that are quite mature in that they want to provide a micro mobility solution, today. And so they weren't necessarily interested in the testing. They wanted to deliver actually, transporting people. So the real testing that's going on has a lot to do with the IoT technology and how that's going to be interacting with the autonomous connected vehicles. But we do have, we're fortunate to have some large hotels in Technology Park. And so you've got some ridership built in. Folks that enjoy that, they can get down to the brewery and things like that. I think once we've actually connected to the town centers, that's where you're actually going to see a true kind of transportation play. But it's been really exciting. And there's been a lot of talking about the economic development. I mean, everything that was mentioned is absolutely right. I think that will be the end state. Scarcity of resources is just going to force it at some point because there have been a lot of late adopters. But what you see for cities that get involved in these smart city initiatives is that residents and businesses will start choosing to locate there just because they like the excitement of being around it. I mean, so we had Intuitive Surgical, which does amazing stuff that they chose to locate. That was big for the state. The state was involved in getting them in. And so it wasn't necessarily that they saw an immediate role for them to come get involved. They're just excited to be, in close proximity to it. So I think for the early adopters, they see a lot of economic development just in terms of, like I said, the business and residents that choose to come in and locate there.
Such a huge plus. So just a plug for y'all. So who doesn't know, the autonomous testing that's happening at Peachtree Corners, it's one of the only in the country and maybe the world now where it's being tested in real-time traffic. So what, you have 150,000 plus residents and cars that are on those roads every day right next to these autonomous vehicles that are going. It's unheard of. So most autonomous vehicles are tested in closed parking lots or fields or whatever. So just a quick plug for, and all the testing that you're still letting people do it complimentary.
Well, that's right. So, I mean, we come in and it's at no charge for them to come in and do the testing. it took a lot of work. You've got to make a lot of the infrastructure improvements to get the autonomous vehicles on the track. And it's funny talking about insurance because the data points are important. And so I was in a very lengthy meeting. We have our insurance brokers, and insuring Peachtree Corners is not always a carrier's dream. But in all seriousness, I mean, we said, why aren't you guys coming in to the insurance carrier? Why aren't you guys coming in and seeing this? A lot of the concerns from the regulatory bodies and insurance carriers, like, we can't figure this out. Like, we'll come in and ask the questions, get the data points that you need, because it's all. And one of the reasons, crossing the intersection of 141. I mean, that will be done extremely safely. We're going to work with all the regulatory bodies that we need to do to make sure all the guardrails in place. But it's going to be an amazing data that'll be pulled because you really get to see how these vehicles are interacting, with traffic, things like that. And the bottom line is, I forget if it's 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 vehicle accidents. It's on us. We're looking at our phones, we're eating. And so I actually enjoy the conversations with residents when they come in and say, how in the world can you do this? This isn't safe. Well, let's talk about that.
So much safer.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. So as Joe or Jane citizen today that's just interested in these technologies, can they go to Peachtree Corners and?
We've got another pilot program launch coming up. So we'll have 4 autonomous vehicles, and that's one of the things that we do is folks will come in, we offer ridership. So some of them are folks staying in the hotel or working hotels or working in the office park, and a lot of them are just curious residents that want to do it. So it's open, and it's also, I mean, this is another quick aside, but when folks talk about smart cities, a lot of times it is a mobility focus, and so they have this idea of what it should look like. And Peachtree Corners, it's been really well received, both locally and nationally. We've got a lot of international partners as well. But from time to time, you will get sort of the hate mail type articles written. And so I remember reading one, and someone was saying, essentially the Peachtree Corner, the title of this article is Peachtree Corners All Spoke or something like that. And they basically made the point, like, you drive through it and you look like, any other suburb city. And it's like, well, true, unless you actually saw the autonomous vehicle. But short of that, I mean, that's kind of the point with the deployment of a lot of these technologies. It's sort of like when you look at our wireless infrastructure, I mean, on purpose, by design, they try to build it in. It's not supposed to be highly visible, but I was like, you just drove through that intersection, you participated in the traffic study. If you're in a stolen car, Gwinnett County Police just got a little beep. So there's a lot going on, I think, that can make the city smarter or whatever. It's not necessarily visible for the residents.
Super, we have a question here.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. Right. Right. Mhm. Right.
So David, for those at home, if you could just kind of summarize the question.
Sure. So yeah, the question was really on sort of we have an innovation center, which is a 25,000 square foot building and houses our startups and our corporate partners. And there's also been recent construction on I think it's either I can't remember how many. Essentially it's a 4-bay vehicle. But the purpose of that, honestly, is again to provide sort of the needed resources. So a lot of times these teams, when they're coming in and they're, for lack of a better word, they probably wouldn't like if I said tinkering, but they're doing, work on the vehicles and things like that. So as far as the stated purpose, I mean, we're going to meet the needs of our partners that are coming in to test, and so we'll provide the facilities that they need to do that. We anticipate there'll be drones, autonomous vehicles, connected vehicles. One of the things that, just to circle back to in our infancy, so we have a design lab. And the thought was that folks would be coming in and doing a lot of prototyping. So we had 3D printers and everything else. And it was it was still put to use. In fact, we have a very cool company that was doing some agricultural IoT devices. They made heavy use of it. But one of the lessons learned is you don't know what the companies need or the research teams need until you talk to them. They may need nothing. They may need a vent or something else to improve airflow. And so it's just one of those things where we provide the space and we sort of respond to what the teams need. But you're correct that the purpose of the bay is to meet the needs of the autonomous vehicle teams that are coming in. And the extent that they'll need that, I really don't know. We'll find out. But
Great. I think we have some more questions. Yeah, Jack.
My question is mostly for how is vehicle capacity and digital Atlanta is going to smart systems like you're talking about. Is it going to be like multiple different companies can control this need, or is it going to be just one company can control this?
Yeah. So I want to clarify, I do not work for City of Atlanta. So Metro Atlanta Chamber is the Chamber of Commerce for the whole 29 county metro area. But the answer is it's going to be a lot of companies. At any smart city kind of effort will not fall on the shoulders of one company. And really what makes the most successful, and you're a prime example, you too, are partnerships. I mean, those public-private partnerships are really what makes smart cities projects go forward. So there'll be a lot of opportunity for all kinds of different companies to get involved.
and it's really out of necessity. I mean, so even if you're just deploying IoT devices, it could be something very small. You may have to be working with Georgia Power to get co-location agreements, just all sorts of things. It's a intersection of folks.
Great. Any more questions here? Scott, do we have any questions online? Okay, so I just want to talk about 5G a little bit. So 5G is kind of a new rollout, and I know that it's going to be integral to the success of smart cities going forward. How is the rollout going? How is 5G working? Because I will tell you, as a citizen, I'm getting a lot more drop phone calls now. Not that that has anything to do with 5G, but it seems like all the spots that used to be dead areas are now dead areas again. But I don't know. I didn't know if anybody could talk about how the rollout's going, if there's some glitches, if it's, or if the rollout's going fairly smooth and working well.
Eric, do you want to talk about that?
So I'm not from a telecommunications company, so I'm not speaking on behalf of any of the.
This is not
big
sponsored by
telcos,
AT&T.
not sponsored. I think the 5G rollout is it's different than most people think of the next generation of telecommunications. One of the biggest eye openers for me, besides the cool benefits, right? You're going to have exponentially more devices being able to connect to a network at once simultaneously. So think about the last time you were at a rock concert. But the last time you were at a concert or a big sporting event, your memory probably wasn't about how awesome the cellular coverage was and how you were able to connect to the network just like you do at home, right? So one of the promises of 5G is tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of devices to be able to connect at once. But one of the things that I remember when I learned it, it was a surprise to me, a pleasant one, was that one of the methodologies of 5G is to have edge computing very close by. This ties into the Internet of Things. And so when you think about that and the difference between the last 4 generations of cellular connectivity, and it was all about the network, this becomes much, much more about the Internet of Things and the processing of data at the edge and the optimization of how those packets of information are traveling. So the things I just said require a foundational and fundamental change in the way the network is rolled out. Much more dense, which means much more repeating network devices. So to the question of how's the rollout going, I think the rollout is going as planned in terms of a planning phase and testing, but the surprise of how many devices where they need to be is something that all venues are trying to deal with. You hear the word blight come up a lot, which is, I think, a nice way of saying having things that used to look nice all of a sudden look like they've been attacked by a bunch of cellular radios. So I think the rollout is meeting a lot of obstacles that were not foreseen as the network, the foundation is fundamentally changed.
Yeah. And David, maybe you can just speak to Peachtree Corners a little bit. And, you know, I realize that in Forsyth County, we've had some issues getting approval of new towers or even on the 5G realm, but I think we've overcome that a little bit. But
well, and that's always, I think the small cell deployments, I mean, there's just sort of built-in pushback on that because people don't like the towers going up. And I think that's whether it's 3G, 4G, 5G, I think there's just the concerns that are same. But I mean, for us, I think having T-Mobile come in early and provide 5G, that created sort of the momentum for a lot of companies to come in and just see how their devices going to work. If they weren't currently 5G enabled, it let them get up to that. But going back to the increase in speed, or what they talk about latency, and I'm not a tech guy. That's not. Although, I mean, I say that we deal with it every day, but it's not my background. But in any event, I mean, that is what is allowing autonomous vehicles, and they're talking about drones to really safely operate. It has to deal with the speed of the network and that vehicle's ability to react. And so in terms of where we're going with mobility, I mean, I think it's an actual critical piece. And it's really, I think, allowing sort of the delivery of the smart city model to occur. So we see it as an integral component. Having the 5G network kind of as the backbone of Curiosity Lab has allowed us to kind of be where we are. So.
Fantastic. I think we have a question from Mitch.
So the answer you get depends on who you're asking. So you're asking.
Can you go ahead and summarize the question?
Yeah.
Further?
So edge for us refers to having where the data is able to be processed, perhaps aggregated with other data points, and have an insight derived for some actionable decision making would take place. So if that can happen at the physical edge, that has to do with where is the data being processed.
They're actually a lot smaller. So the question was about what does a 5G tower look like? And they're actually a lot smaller.
I
And
mean, so what we've had is essentially rooftop deployments. I mean, so this is getting away from the really large towers. And we've been moving away from the large towers in any event. It's gone in what they're calling small cell, but you're seeing them just shrink in terms of their size, which I think everybody's in favor of. So you're not having to disguise it as a funny looking pine tree, or something.
I think the small cells are really the key as far as different cities that are adopting it, because not everyone's going to be able to have a rooftop. So the small cells are smaller devices that are put closer together to make sure that the data is transmitted more quickly and that there's lower latency and higher throughput, right? So, I mean, ultimately, what I'm seeing from agreements that I see happen is between cities, making agreements of where the small cell is going to go. Are you going to pay for it? Where are you going to put them? Are you going to put them on a utility pole? Who's going to pay for that? Are you going to pay rent? So I'm seeing a lot of those agreements kind of happen around the small cell conversation, but then there is also kind of the rooftop all-encompassing 5G. But I think that one of the big things about the rollout will be those agreements that are made on the placements of the small cells. And those are key in a lot of areas to make sure that the full 5G can be kind of realized. Yeah. Yeah.
One of block is about millimeter wave.
Yeah, which is a lot. I mean, that's a lot of small cells.
Yeah, and another thing to kind of, sorry, hopefully you can hear me or Eric, but if your question was about the edge. If you think about compute, that's what edge computing means. This decision happens close to where the people are, where that decision has to happen. So So if you look at sort of the tree today, there's the big data centers, Amazon, Google, Salon, et cetera, you've got Microsoft, Store. Now they're putting compute or little data centers at the bottom of the cell phone. So as those repeaters are out by the road, everywhere you are, they're talking back here or they're talking back to there. So what you gather from all the sensors out here goes as close as it can when it needs to make a fast decision. That's what latency meant. So that's what they meant by latency. So if you're an autonomous car and you're going 20 miles an hour, you may not need as much speed, but if you want to start going 45 or 50 miles an hour, you want a lot of decision making. You want to be able to say that's a dog in front of me, stop, etc.
Yeah.
So the change in a lot of this money that's going to be spent on infrastructure.
Yeah.
It is a fundamental change in infrastructure that's got to happen to get to the Jetsons, right? But once it does, the technologies are here, quite frankly. It's just bringing those ecosystems back together in a way that is usable. And to this point, we're getting comfortable.
Yeah.
District Corner's done a great job of that.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. And one question from Scott.
Question coming in, but I want to mention, I want to answer, I guess, participate in Mitch's question also. So when we did talking traffic lights, that was really where I was first introduced to edge computing. And so, those silver boxes on the side of the street is actually collecting its cameras and collecting data. And the edge computing is this video is probably the highest bandwidth across the internet. Well, with a camera in an intersection, it doesn't have to send data that's just a car going through the intersection. But if there's a car that does some sort of anomaly, then that information is processed separately and sent across the internet. So that's the way to think about edge computing is the box is actually making a decision there at the moment of what we're referring to as the edge. It doesn't have to send irrelevant information across the internet. Question from the group here online is all the conversations thus far has been about urban areas. Is there any talk about this going into more rural communities since broadband is a big issue?
I have a good answer to that. So the question is, are there smart cities projects happening in rural areas? And there absolutely are. So Deborah Lamb, who works at Georgia Tech, she's the Inclusive Smart Cities Director there, and she's also the founding director of the Partnership for Inclusive Innovation that Lieutenant Governor launched last year. So Deborah Lamb and we're founding partners on this project, launched 3 or 4 years ago. Well, Deborah Lamb and her team, the Georgia Smart Communities Project. And the entire point of it was to do exactly what Scott mentioned, to really make sure that it wasn't just urban areas that were getting to take advantage of the smart city technologies, that they were really being put out and used throughout the state of Georgia. And they're about to expand outside of Georgia. But as a result, wow, I think there's almost 14 smart cities projects now that have been born out of the Georgia Smart Communities Challenge. And what's great about them is communities apply, and then once they win, they're given a mentor from Georgia Tech that helps them through it. And then they're also given funding to help them get everything off the ground. And then year 2, they're given kind of some supplemental support to make sure that those pilots that they launch get implemented, which is another whole topic that we could talk about. Getting a pilot into actual fruition is a super challenge. But some of the things that she's done, she's got an autonomous vehicle shuttle happening. She's got a lot of first mile, last mile projects happening around mobility. She's got a flooding project happening around Savannah. So yes, there are so many projects happening in the rural areas, and smart cities should not be confined to just the urban areas. Every community should be able to take advantage of that. And right here in Georgia, we're doing a lot of research to show how that can happen and really setting great examples for the whole United States about how this can happen. It's a one of a kind program that she's launched, and there's not another state that's doing it. So kudos to Georgia Tech and Deborah Lamb and her team on that. So if y'all want to look at it, it's Georgia Smart Communities.
Fantastic.
We did not plant that question. No.
Awesome. Scott, is there any more questions online? Okay, one more question from Mitch and we'll wrap up.
Chambly is one, Gwinnett's one. There we go. Thank you.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, what,
I don't have my
what city
list.
was that? Thomasville, Georgia. Okay. As
Yeah.
a example of a rural smart city.
Thank you. I don't
Very
have my
good.
list of where they are.
Just jump in and say, I mean, some of the exciting things that you see are, I mean, it's sort of low hanging fruit, but you'll see, and I don't have any names off the top of my head, but you've seen sort of the, some of the more rural areas solving transportation problems by, having essentially a rideshare type app. They're saying, let's abandon the route and make this more on demand, and really just kind of adopting today's technologies to make things more efficient. They also, the rural areas have some of the fewer challenges. When you look at the way that they can use drones. I mean, right now, I don't think, my understanding is that, I know Georgia Power does this, but they're going out and doing windshield surveys to get their canopy surveys done, looking at, use that just begs for a drone and things like that. And rural areas are able to implement that very quickly because they just have fewer issues to deal with. So there's a lot of exciting things.
Agreed.
Fantastic. Well, it's past 11, so I think we're going to wrap up. I want to thank our panelists today, as well again as our sponsors for making today's event happening. And everybody have a great day and stay safe.
Thank you.